What's up guys, welcome back. I'm Charles, mXrevival, mXrevival.com, and as you can see I am out here with the beautiful RM250AF project. There is also a lot of mock-up going on out here, and I assure you I wouldn't go this far without you. I just can't resist when I'm out here with this thing. I'm hanging the pipes off of it with zip ties, you name it, gas tank, subframe. I just love tinkering with it. And I didn't have much of a choice otherwise because I was waiting on a part to be machined so you and I could move forward. And so this is episode 2. In episode 1, I talked to you guys about where the project came from, which parts I'm using, what bike, this and that. And then towards the end of that video, we went ahead and took the RM250 and dropped it into the RMZ chassis for the first time. Now, I left off with the swing arm main pin started in the engine, but I couldn't go all the way through. Reason being, the brake pedal return spring mounting point was in the way. It was actually contacting the engine, so I got stuck right there. It was holding the engine a little bit sideways, and so what I did was actually take a grinder, cut that thing off, then smooth everything out as if it was never there, and that allowed me to get the engine into the frame, push the swing arm main pin all the way through, and guess what? They're the same size. I'm honestly not surprised because, like I said in episode 1, companies don't really go out of their way to make a bunch of different parts. I don't know if the pins are the same exact part number, but it wouldn't surprise me if the 250 pin from the 2-stroke fit in the Z chassis and just bolted right up. We don't really need to worry about it because we're using the 250Z pin. Now there was another little part on the back of the swing arm. We're using the 2018 RM250 swing arm. There was a little bit of a casting on the back of that was really close to the back of the engine. I don't think it was ever going to contact the engine as the suspension cycled, but it didn't really hurt to buzz this thing down. So I went ahead and took some material out of that too, just enough. Now we have a few more millimeters clearance between the back of the engine case and the swing arm. And that brings us to today, where we are right now. So I'm going to go ahead and strip all the things that are loosely hanging off this bike, tank, pipes, etc. I have some awesome findings for you guys in today's video. We're going to go ahead and actually mount the swing arm in, use the main pin and all those other things, and be able to set torque on the swing arm main pin today. The reason I couldn't do that before was because I was waiting on the machined part, as I mentioned, and that is due to a discrepancy between the back of the RM250 engine, the back of the RM250 engine, and then a gap that's left behind from that discrepancy. And so what I did was I had a spacer machine at a local machine shop. We're going to get into that right now. I'm going to show you guys exactly what I found, the details of all of that, and then we'll go ahead and slap that sucker in. In addition to that, where we left off last week, the front of the engine is resting on the RMZ250 chassis mounts, and so the engine can't roll forward anymore, and it needs to. So we're also going to go ahead and grind those suckers off. Once we grind those off, we'll be able to rotate the engine down or up in the front, whatever we need, and that will help us get some pipe clearance and also some air boot situation stuff going on in the back. So having said that, guys, thanks for joining me in episode 2. If you like the content, don't forget to like and subscribe, and without further ado, let's get into today's video. Alright guys, so this is where some of the magic happens, at least the beginning magic, the thing you need to set straight before you carry on with the rest of the project. So what I found was this. I went ahead and measured the original RM250 swing arm as well as the RMZ swing arm, and I found that with a set of calipers, the drive side of the swing arm on both swing arms is exactly the same. I got a 57.8 millimeter measurement on this one and a 57.7 millimeter measurement on this one. So I don't have the best calipers in the world, but you get the point, close enough. And so here's the next step right here. We have these collars from the swing arms. They ride inside the bearings. There are 2 of these in each swing arm, obviously, one on each side. And I also found that both of these are also the exact same size in both swing arms, regardless of 2-stroke or 4-stroke. Mind you, one's an 04, one's a 2020. There's a pretty big gap there, but like I said, they won't spend any extra money if they don't have to. At any rate, this is really good for us. Not only is that really good for us, but if this is the same and this is the same, that also means that the chain and the sprocket are right in the exact same place we want them when the 2-stroke goes into the 4-stroke. So that's already done. That's a huge deal. So you already heard me say that there was a discrepancy in engine width between the RM250 and the RMZ setup. Since we know the swing arms measure out exactly the same and we know only the engines differ between the 2 of these, I needed to make a little collar or a sleeve. This sucker is just 5 millimeters longer. That was the difference in width of the engine cases between 2 and 4-stroke. So this sucker here should allow us to drop the swing arm into the frame and then set the proper torque on the main pin. We should also have proper alignment at this point. And this is going to go in the non-drive side because that's where I have the gap. Now you can also see that hangs out a little bit more. This is machined from stainless, which is great. It should resist corrosion. And you can also now see the difference between the case width by the extra length of this here spacer. So I think it's time we drop this sucker in the chassis. All right, guys, she's in and she fits exactly how she's supposed to. No more slack on this juncture here. You can see that all the slack is gone where we would have had a wider 450 or 250 four-stroke engine. This spacer takes up that gap and everything fits nice and snug in here. All right, guys, so that's step one. Now that we have the swing arm main pin in there and that new collar that's taking up the slack between the two engine differences, I'm actually able to set torque on this. And in my opinion, and like I mentioned in episode 1, I haven't actually done an AF build, but common sense would say, once I get this dialed in and I get this tightened here, to torque spec, which is about 50 pounds, I believe. I looked up the RM250 manual. I don't need to go that crazy, but right about there, snug. Now I know that the front of the engine, where those engine mounts are gonna be, everything should be square. Everything should be kind of where it needs to be, and that will help me kind of gauge the front end and figure out how far off are the mounts, because I would like to make a bracket that would hold the 250 engine into this 250Z frame and not have to do as much cutting and welding, but we'll see how it goes. At any rate, I think this is the important first step. Super cool to get that out of the way. And guys, just for reference, we're gonna go ahead and measure this spacer real quick. This is the old one that we added 5 millimeters to. Told you I wanted you to see everything, so here we go. This should really help you guys out if you want to get this started before I have a kit, if that even ever happens. Now, these aren't the best calipers in the world, but I have a 51.73 millimeters, so probably a 52 or maybe a 51. These are honestly just from Harbor Freight. They get the job done. Don't make fun of my shit. At any rate, there you have it. You're going to want to add 5 millimeters to this when you take your stock spacer to your local machine shop. All right, guys, so the next item of interest, or actually the thing that's holding us up, is going to be the front engine mount on the stock RMZ 4-stroke chassis. Putting the swing arm in is a little bit of a fight because the engine likes to fall down and get underneath that front bracket, and it makes it really hard to maneuver the engine. And if you get the swing arm in before you clearance this mount, the engine is effectively stuck underneath this mount. So you want it to be on top when you're test fitting your swing arm. That's super important. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to go ahead and shave this. We're going to need to buzz a little bit of this off the frame. That will allow the engine to drop. Right now it's sitting on top of that Z engine mount, and so I have no movement up and down. The reason we need to get this engine to drop is that right now, maybe not with all pipes, but the Pro Circuit pipe for the RM250 engine 04 through 08, it actually hits the frame rail when it comes out of the engine. So we need to get this engine to drop down, which will give the pipe a little bit of leeway going forward and help it clear the frame rail as it comes out of the engine. Additionally, which I'll show you guys in a few minutes, when I have the carburetor and the 252 stroke air boot mocked up inside the bike, it does clear the shock, but it's rubbing it just a little bit between the shock and the frame spar. Now, when we drop the engine down up front, we will not only get clearance on the pipe, but also the air boot will come forward, clearing the shock better, and it should raise up as the front of the engine goes down. That will also help us get the air boot up to the airbox a little better. Right now it's a little low. Like I said, I'll show you all that stuff, but I want to be thorough in explaining all the things I do to this build, and at the same time, I'm also learning. Up next, we're going to go ahead and mark where we want to cut or clearance this front engine mount so we can get that engine rotation we're looking for. This is going to require the engine come out again. Don't think for a second that if you're doing this, the engine isn't going to be in and out like 5,000 times, but I'll go ahead and rip this out now and we'll buzz off some of this frame. Guys, if you're going to be cutting or grinding aluminum or anything else for that matter, make sure you wear something that's going to protect your lungs, protect your eyes. I'm also going to be throwing on hearing protection because the tools are obviously loud. Just use common sense. You only get one shot with those organs, so make sure to take care of them. Alright guys, we got this thing trimmed down. It's looking really good. I'm going to try and test fit the engine now. I used a die grinder to chop that off. I've seen guys do a sawzall with a wood blade. It was probably a lot faster actually. And then I just smoothed it out with one of these bad boys. Started with the red pad, which is coarse, moved to the green pad, very fine, and I sort of shaped this thing, made it a little more round, and made it look like it was that way when the bike was new. It was time to see if that engine fits now. All right, we made a ton of room. I used to hit right about there, as you guys saw. Now I'm able to travel down quite a bit. I may need to clearance this just a little bit more. We'll see what happens when we mock everything up, the pipe and the air boot. It wouldn't be a really big deal just to take a little bit more out of this really harsh corner. As for the opposite side of the frame, this same location, I'm not hitting because this portion of the two-stroke engine is actually inset so much that it clears the mount altogether. So we need to see if that was enough to clear the pipe and get the air boot just a little bit higher. So interestingly enough, in trying to clearance the front of the frame so I can lower the engine and see if I have clearance for the pipe to exit the engine without hitting the frame rail, and also see if the air boot is now high enough, I'm still getting some contact on the pro circuit pipe, but as you guys can see, when I use my cone pipe, it doesn't hit at all, so huge difference there. So if the engine is in the right place and the air boot's going to tell the story, sometimes you may just have to use a different pipe. In the event that the air boot is now in the right place and I don't need to lower the engine anymore in the front and the PC pipe still hits, then you'll just have to venture away from that unit and use something else. You guys can check out the cone pipe on the mXrevival.com website if you'd like. We import those from Canada. They are super cool and I can't wait to see that thing on this chassis. But it is super interesting and good to know that those two pipes have quite a different clearance on the front of the engine. So now we're going to need to go ahead and try and mock up the airbox and the RMZ subframe and just see, hey, is that boot high enough? Does it need to go a little higher? In which case we'd grind a little more of this engine mount down and lower the engine some more. And every little thing and tweak we do is getting us that much closer to riding the sucker. Alright guys, I've got the air boot smashed into the airbox. It is so far off, it's not even funny. So basically what that means is I need to take some more material out of the frame up front and get the engine to drop even more. And since you guys already have the basic idea of what I did to do that, even though I tried to make it clean so maybe we could get a bracket in there, that idea is going to have to go out the window. I'm going to hack more metal out, get the engine to drop further down, and get the air boot to come even further up. One more issue that's going to occur when I take even more metal out of the front of the frame is that clutch cover is going to hit the frame spar on the right side again, kind of in that exact same spot where I already took off the brake pedal return spring mounting point. So I'm going to have to clearance some material out of that area as well. So once I do finally get the front of the engine down low enough and raise the air boot up high enough to graft to the airbox properly, it's pretty much going to be off to the races at that point, because we'll have the swing arm main pin through the back of the engine, which is fixed and permanent. Then we'll have the engine at whatever angle it needs to be so that the air boot and the airbox connect, and that'll also be fixed and permanent. And at that point we're going to be able to measure and see where we need to have aluminum tabs welded onto the frame in order to reach out and grab the RM250 engine in the front and on the bottom. And as you guys saw, I can already use one of the two pipes I have, and I also think that the pro circuit pipe will fit again if the engine goes even lower. And that would be ideal because most of you guys are going to run either a stock, an FMF, or a pro circuit pipe. So what I'm going to try and do before episode 3 is I'm going to keep hacking, find out those two permanent points, the swing arm main pin and the air boot, and check back in with you guys. After that, we're going to have to start looking into things like the radiators, because we're going to have to modify all the spigots where the hoses would normally attach and feed the engine, move those around and get them into the proper spots so that they actually work with this frame, with this engine. The radiators are obviously set up for the RM250 4-stroke engine right now. A little bit more cutting, hacking, and aluminum welding, and we should be on our way with those. And thankfully, right now as it sits, so long as I don't do a head stay for the engine right through the center, in the back of this area here, the ECU is going to sit right in the same location that it did when it was a 4-stroke, and that will keep things really easy as far as the electronics are concerned. So for right now, I'm going to leave the ECU where it is. I really like the fact that all that stuff just kind of fell right in. The coil bolted in where the old coil went, all that stuff. Of course, if I make any changes, you guys will be the first ones to know about it. And so having said that, I hope you guys enjoyed episode 2. And don't forget, we're doing the YZ250 build and MX parts giveaway. Next video will probably be a YZ build. I'll have the frames back, a bunch of parts from Cerakote, so I need you guys to go check out the website, mXrevival.com. Get entered to win that YZ250 build, and when you do that, you're also entered to win decal kits, Lectron carburetors, fat head, cylinder heads, a bunch of stuff that I'm going to be giving away. So thanks for checking it out, and I will see you guys next time.